Welcome to another episode of the Live Your Full Potential podcast. Today I have Mr. Shamail Siddiqui in the house. We met last year and I've gotten to know you over the last few months. And the reason why I wanted to bring you on this podcast is because we share a passion. As you know, I've recently become a father and I grew up believing that I was stupid because of one reason, because of the school system that I was put in. And you obviously believe that there was a better way, not to judge any school system or any, traditional school. You believe that there was a better way to nurture and nourish and support and empower children. And I wanted to share your mission, your vision, and your story and why you do what you do with our audience. So first of all, I just want to say welcome to this conversation.
Great to be here.
So like I mentioned before, we have a shared passion. Mm-hmm. For me, like even now at preschool level, I have put Mila into it sounds ridiculous, but a private preschool. Like they don't have more than 10 kids. Mm-hmm. So every single day they can focus on what makes Mila come alive, what her strengths are. I get 2 check-ins every single week from the school. And obviously I live in Thailand. If she wasn't in Thailand, 100% she would be in Masterminds school. Masterminds.ae, one of your businesses that I really think is amazing, that the work that you're doing. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about what Masterminds is? A little bit more beyond it's a school for kids that, you want to help them learn and have fun. Like, tell us a bit about Masterminds and why it was created. And then we'll go into your story later.
Okay. No, thank you for that. I think, and you're right, we share a passion. I mean, your parents, you realize what that kind of does to you and how it changes your perspective. 16 years ago, when I became a father, right, I came to Dubai as a strategy consultant with Booz & Company. I'd spent my time in New York working for Goldman Sachs and companies like that. And I never thought I'd go into education. I just had my daughter and I started looking at the school systems for her. And I realized how outdated they really were. I mean, it was incredible that the schools had not really evolved in a fundamental way since you and I went to school. And that was very concerning for me. Right? And ultimately she went to a traditional preschool in Dubai. It was okay. She started going there. But again, I could intuitively feel that this was not right in terms of her realizing her full potential. So that kind of triggered this global quest to go find the best and foremost thinking in early childhood development. And when I went out there, what I found was incredible. And it's important to know that, the reason we're very different, and I'll get into that in a minute, is that from day one, we didn't really take an education view of it. We took a neuroscience view at it.
Can you explain that?
So it was all about, okay, how does a child's brain develop in the first 6 years of life? And when we started speaking to neuroscientists and child development experts, we realized that 0 to 6 is absolutely crucial, right? This is when the children's brains are developing most rapidly. And what you do between 0 to 6, it stays with the child for the rest of their life. So if you get 0 to 6 right, the rest of the journey throughout schooling and life is smooth. If you don't get that right, there is plenty of research that shows that children struggle, and you can still get ahead, but it'll be harder. The fundamental premise is that kids who start ahead are going to stay ahead.
Wow.
And if I talk about the underlying principle that Masterminds is based on, and again, this was based on speaking to so many neuroscientists, so many child development experts around the world, is that exceptionalism, or you could call it anything. You can call it being gifted. You can call it being a genius. I try to stay away from those really lofty words because sometimes if it sounds too good to be true, people think it is, even though it isn't. All of those things are, there's a myth out there that those things are somehow divinely endowed or genetically endowed, and people who have that are just lucky and different from anybody else. But as you get into the neuroscience of things on one hand, and as you look into the stories of the people who are considered geniuses around the world, you see that actually genius is not something that is endowed. The prodigy myth is false. And that genius or giftedness or exceptionalism can be created in every single child. And that is the fundamental premise of Masterminds.
I'm so glad that I invited you onto this podcast because I'm just so inspired by having this conversation because I am a father, but because I'm fascinated by neuroscience and psychology and human potential. And you know, it was never found through research, but you could, for years I've heard people say like, I think even in neurolinguistic programming, my education in NLP, they tell you that, oh, it's between the ages of 4 and 7 that you're most impressionable. So the fact that you said you've done extensive research to find out that it's between 0 and 6, it makes me want to like take a private flight back home to my daughter ASAP. But it makes a lot of sense to me because why 4 and 7? Why primary school years or early primary school years? When I observe my daughter who's 1 year, 7 months, I'm like, she's just learning things at a rapid speed, whereas you don't really see that in 5, 6, 7-year-olds. But so is it fair to say that, because I think this is probably very unique, that the school that you have built and the schools that you're building are built on neuroscience evidence as opposed to education or inspiration?
Absolutely, and of course, look, there's educational pedagogy that is actually, closely intertwined.
Pedagogy?
Pedagogy, so curriculum, teaching methodology is the
Okay.
technical term that gets thrown around. But yeah, sure. The way we teach, the way we educate, the way kids learn, all of that is closely related to a foundation of neuroscience, and that's why what we do kind of works. So again, and when you hear this as a new parent, right? If let's say your child is 3 or 4, the first thing is a sense of panic. Which is what I felt because my daughter was going to a regular preschool at 3. And when I learned all of this stuff, I was like, oh my God, I'm missing the boat and I have to get on it. So, as soon as I found out, I got all these tools and I was still a consultant at that time. My life was very busy, but both me and my wife really got on it. And, my daughter was really the guinea pig for this curriculum. And as we developed it, we used it on her. And it was incredible the results that we saw, that between 3 and 6, her intelligence, her knowledge, but most importantly her curiosity, her love of learning, her adaptability in terms of wanting to go from one thing to the other just absolutely multiplied. And by 6 she was speaking 3 languages, she was learning to play the violin, she was doing gymnastics and all these incredible things. And then we started to see even more incredible things. You start to see that learning in one area starts to impact learning in another area. So when we took her for tennis lessons when she was about 6 and a half, we thought, she's just starting off, it's going to take her some time. And suddenly she's smashing balls as if she's been playing tennis since she was born. And what we realized was that all of the fine motor development that had come through gymnastics, that had come through swimming, that has even come through language development, was impacting all other areas of learning. And that is really the fundamental thing that people kind of think about learning as disconnected in terms of, what's intellectual, what's physical, what's social, what emotional. It's all closely related. And to give you a couple of examples that I certainly found mind blowing when we found those out, and I think it's important for people to understand. So, for example, swimming is closely related to math attainment. Kids who are strong swimmers,
Forgive me.
yeah.
Math attainment.
So
You
math
have to speak
skills,
in simple terms to me.
sure, math skills.
Okay.
Kids who are
How?
strong because the same part of the brain, the same part of the cerebral cortex that actually is used in swimming. So, and we take certain things for granted because we feel it comes easy to us as adults or older kids. But swimming or movement of any kind where you're putting one foot ahead of the other, this is a complex brain function. So when you're teaching a child to swim and they're exercising that complex brain function, the brain as a whole grows, and suddenly you start to see that they're doing better in math. Same thing with when the kids do gymnastics, suddenly they start writing better because the grip control is getting better. So it's all kind of related, and that's what Masterminds is based on intellectual, physical, social development, all kind of linked together in a strong foundation of neuroscience.
Wow, it's so inspiring. So, in layman's terms, fitness makes you smarter.
Absolutely. And this should come as no shock to you,
What?
right?
I was going to say, why didn't it work for me? No, but I probably started too late. I love what you said, and I love what is a theme in Masterminds, also in your soon to be released book, which is, forgive me, not the exact words, but genius is something that is learned.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the idea, that genius is something that is nurtured, it is developed, it is not endowed. Now, it is important to qualify that, and one of the things I also did along with the neuroscience would look at the stories of some of the people, Albert Einstein, you look at, Thomas Edison, Vincent van Gogh, the people who've been considered geniuses throughout time. And you do find every now and then that the prodigy idea exists. So Mozart, for example, was writing songs since he was 5 years old. So clearly, exception. They're clear exceptions, and I don't think anybody can rationally explain why those exist. They just are, right? But in the vast majority of cases, right, the people who we consider geniuses, if you met them when they were kids or when they were teens or when they were youth, you'd never considered that they could be geniuses. And that's one of the things I'll be bringing into the book, is to really look at their stories to understand what is the one thing that really did it for them. And I want to talk about my favorite story of all time, which is Thomas Edison. So Thomas Edison, obviously back when he was around, there was no fancy names for learning disorders like dyslexia, ADHD, etc. Yeah. So he went to a regular school, and at some point he was having difficulties learning. At some point he was sent back home, and there was a letter that he brought to his mother, right? And this letter, and he was told that he can no longer go to school. So when his mother opened that letter, and he asked, at that point he couldn't read, what does the letter say? His mother said that the school is saying that you can no longer go there, and I'm sure you've heard the story, because you're a genius and the school is too small for you. And that moment instilled in him a belief that he was a genius, and he went on to do these incredible things. And many years later, when he was already established as who he was, and his mother passed away, and when he was back here, he found the letter. And the letter said, your child is addled, which is the name they gave to being mentally deficient, and we will no longer allow him to attend school. And when he found that letter, one of the things he wrote in his diary was, Thomas Alva Edison, an addled child, who through a hero mother became the genius of the century. So it's an incredible story in so many dimensions, because one, it tells you how genius is created and how self-belief is one of the many components of that genius. But it also tells you that as a parent or an authority figure, the power that we have in our kids' lives, because you can be critical and you can tell them, why are you crying, why are you making mistakes, and many parents,
or you could have done better,
and as a parent you have to be super careful until the child turns 6. Until the child turns 6, they have no filter. So when I say something to you, you have a bunch of socially conditioned filters, and you will filter everything that I'm saying through them, and then you will choose to perceive and believe what you like. A child until the age of 6 has no such filter. Everything you tell him or her will go straight to the subconscious brain. So
essentially everything that's told is the truth.
Everything is the truth. And if it's coming from an authority figure like a parent, it's like the gospel, right? I mean, it's coming from God, and they will believe it. Now, they can believe that you're incredibly talented and you'll go on to do amazing things, or they'll go on to believe that, hey, you're doing things wrong all the time, you're misbehaved and those things. And parents are not aware, and sometimes they instill those things in their children without knowing. But for us, that knowledge is also like a superpower, right? Because that's, again, what we do at Masterminds. You leverage the first 6 years of a child's life where they're capable of learning everything, and where their brain is, the brain connections are occurring exponentially in any case. And we find, through our methodologies, through the work we've done with child development experts and neuroscientists, we've essentially found a methodology to exponentially accelerate those neural connections. So, by the time the kids start with us at 1 year old, and in our earlier school, they get to kindergarten 2 at 6, they're performing at the level that is at least 2 or 3 years ahead of their age. Our 6-year-olds.
Can you just slow down and say that again? Because I think that's very, very powerful what you just said.
Yeah. By the time the children who start with us at 1 or 2 years old, by the time they get to kindergarten 2 at 6 years of age, they are performing 2 or 3 years ahead of their age in terms of curriculum standard. So
6 years old, they're actually performing like 8 and 9 year olds.
Absolutely. Their comprehension, their, verbal skills, their language skills, all of our students. So we do 3 languages in our Dubai school every day: English, Arabic, and French. So all our kids are trilingual. We do 1 major physical activity every day. It's either swimming, gymnastics, or ball skills. We have Suzuki violin and piano integrated within the curriculum. And a lot of times parents ask, well, why the violin? Well, violin is a complex instrument. You have to learn how to hold it, how to manipulate the sticks and manipulate the strings. Now, we're not trying to turn out violin virtuosos. for everything that we do, it's the impact on brain development. It is an incredible instrument for early brain development. It really accelerates brain development, emotional development, and that's what we do. Our KG2s put on, violin concerts. Yeah, I mean, book one of Suzuki, which is, simple stuff. But
So every kid learns violin.
since they are 1.5 years old, they start with fomelins, violins made out of foam, where they learn the position and how to hold it. At 2.5, they start with actual violins. And the violin is also interesting because you have it available in every size. It starts with 1/32nd, which is a tiny toy violin looking thing. And then it goes all the way up to a full-size violin. So the violin actually grows with the child. So it's really this holistic foundation of intellectual, physical, social development. The other question often is, well, why, right? Why are you in such a hurry? Well, we're in such a hurry because we want to capitalize on those 6 years of age, the first 6 years. And then what that enhanced comprehension does, it actually creates a momentum and a snowball effect throughout their life, because by the time our kids are 6, we do an entrepreneurship class for them. They learn team building. They're actually doing a woodworking workshop where they're constructing little models of things. We're now introducing design technology, AI training. We can do that because we've built the comprehension to be advanced. And that just keeps going on and on. Again, back to my daughter, when she was 11, she was reading at the level of a 17-year-old. Her math skills were off the charts. So, when she was, I think, 12 or 13, I took her to a Tony Robbins live,
UPW.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was at Coca-Cola Arena in Dubai.
I was there.
You were there? Okay,
yeah.
Well, so was I, so was my wife, so was my daughter. And because she was so young, we were kind of somewhat in the front, and she was the youngest person in the audience. And, when Tony Robbins passed by, he actually turned at her and acknowledged her because she was probably the youngest audience member he's seen. But she could go there and she could understand those principles, and she could get that knowledge of success that she still remembers because we started early. And that's really what it is. I mean, for me, my goal for her and for all the kids who come to Masterminds is that, you and I as adults, we've been through our journey, we've struggled, we've, been through different seasons, we've gotten to where we are through, not an easy journey, right? For kids, it's not about making their journey easier, but it's about helping them become more resilient and more capable to navigate their journey, and helping them get there faster. Because, who knows how much time anybody has, right? If they can get 1 or 2 more decades as entrepreneurs, as engineers, as, business owners, as creators of something, I mean, they can make an incredible impact in the world. And that's also one of the key tenets of what we're trying to do.
I feel like I just keep talking to you and with you for like 2 hours. I've done many podcasts over the years. This has got to be one of the most inspirational podcasts that I've done, because it's so close to my heart. And I don't know if you could tell, but about a minute ago, I started getting teary because I don't know why. I just feel I do know why. I just feel very emotional because, one, in listening to you speak, I realize that my daughter can have it all. She just needs to be in the right environment. At least she can believe that she can have it all. But also, I had the opposite of everything you've just said. And it's taken me a lifetime of work to undo what was done to me, with no animosity or bad feelings towards my parents or anything. Everyone in the world is just doing their best. Everyone in life is doing their best. But as parents, if we do what you're saying and give our kids the tools and the resources that you're speaking about and sharing, you can do, even if your purpose is never beyond you're taking care of your child, you can live a very, very purposeful life, because you can give birth to the next Thomas Edison. It's very, very powerful what you're saying. And there's so many different avenues I want to go into and different angles I want to approach this conversation from. We might have to do a part 2. But something I would like to speak about is creativity. I know that you obviously, what's the word? You encourage creativity, playfulness, having fun, etc. Kids want to learn as long as they're having fun doing what they're doing. You mentioned curiosity briefly too. I said to a client the other day, I said, everyone has the ability to live out their genius. What does that mean for you personally? It means living your full potential. But a lot of people get stuck in doing. And for me, I lost all kind of connection to my own genius. Even if I do say so myself, through feedback, I have been told by a few people over the years that you are the best coach in the world. So I have my own genius. I have the ability to inspire greatness in people. That is my genius. But my genius was squashed as a kid because I was just put into a system of execution. Like, here's the tests, here's the exams. The only thing you're going to do for the next 12 years is you're going to execute. And like I said to a client just a few days ago, I said, genius cannot be found in execution. It has to be found in creativity. Can you just speak to that and speak about how creativity allows you to bring out the genius in the children that I guess that are in masterminds, or just in general?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a crucial part, right? I mean, first, to your point about what you experience in the traditional school system, what I experience and so many other people are experiencing, I mean, the system is outdated, right? It was created back, close to 100 years ago.
Industrials.
Exactly. And what's very interesting is in a few years ago, or rather, maybe a couple of decades ago, they actually found J.D. Rockefeller's personal diary. And in the J.D. Rockefeller was actually, obviously a big business tycoon in the U.S. And he actually played a key role in creating the U.S. public education system. And they found his notes about how, what his goals were when he was actually creating that system. And his stated goal is that we need a system that creates pliant factory workers, because they were preparing for the industrial, revolution that was to come. They needed people on a factory line, and they needed to be obedient, do as they're told. And again, if you look at the classes that we have, it's not really, you wouldn't be surprised, right? I mean, a teacher standing, droning on in front of 20, 30 kids, she tends to pick on not the one who has their hand raised and is keen, but the one who doesn't have their hand raised and is maybe a bit reserved, to make them sort of doubt, what they're doing. Often it happens in these kind of cases. And it's a industrial era system. It just does not work anymore. And in the last half century, I mean, if you look at the incredible innovation that has happened in the world, from the supercomputers that we have in our pockets to how media has evolved, everything has changed. But for some reason, certain industries in education has stayed the same. And it needs to change, because let's take an example of media, right? So if you remember, if you're old enough, you remember VCRs at some point, right? VCRs became DVD players at some point. They had these big laser disc players. Then at some point they had these tiny discs. But the real revolution happened when you took the box out altogether. And now you have unlimited content streamed through your internet cable into your living room, into your TV. You have Netflix, you have Disney Plus,
24
whatever.
hours a day.
You had to take the box apart. I mean, if that box had stayed, I mean, there's only so much innovation that you can do inside that box. And it's the same with schooling. That box has to go away. That box makes no sense anymore. To do one size fits all learning for everybody, it just doesn't make sense. And again, the way we find creativity is, first of all, to understand every child. And you cannot understand every child in class sizes of 20 or more. The class sizes we started in the earlier school are 12 to 15, but actually that's not the class size. We split them up into subgroups of 6 to 8. And all that learning happens at that group level. The teacher is trained to understand what every child's learning style is. Some people some kids are easy. They'll be, audio-visual learners, and they'll sit down and they'll learn for periods of time. And young kids, that's very rare. Most of them are, kinesthetic learners, for example. They need to be moving to kind of, to learn. And we have to do everything at their pace. So we do short duration, high frequency. Everything has to be joyful, and people often mistakenly make this differentiation between learning and fun. And that's because it's coming from their experience, where school was such a drudgery that learning is just, my God, this horrible thing we have to do. But if you do it well, learning is the highest form of fun. Our kids are, our 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds are learning about great art masterpieces, and they're matching the paintings to the artists, or they're matching the books to the authors, and they're loving doing it because that matchmaking game that we put together is so engaging and so joyful. they can't get enough. And now that we've extended to a micro school for elementary and middle school students, our 7-year-olds are learning Greek mythology and Roman architecture, and they're loving it because of the way that it is taught. So the creativity comes first of all when they're young. You have to give them broad exposure to everything so they can actually first of all develop in different ways, and then start to hone in on where they would like to go. Some children, for example, will be big on the violin, others will be big on the piano. Some people realize that French, I really love French. Some will say, okay, Arabic is my language. Some will become gymnasts. Some will say, okay, certain knowledge topics are art and architecture is something I find really interesting, or I find animals really interesting. So the first principle has to be that you have to operate at the level of each child. You have to have personalized attention, individualized education. You cannot develop creativity doing one thing for everyone.
I believe in this so much. And the reason why I got to a point in school where I just believed I was stupid, I just barely passed high school, was because I believed at a very early age I should have been doing what I enjoyed, what I loved. And kids would be so different growing up if they just were doing that. I just love what you're talking about. I love what you're about. Honestly, like, whatever you're doing next, just take my money, because it's just so incredibly inspiring. I think in part of understanding a business and a mission, you want to understand the person as well. For the people that are really inspired by this conversation, tell us a bit about Shamail Siddiqui before Masterminds, like where you're from and what led to you, I guess, getting to the point where we kicked off the beginning of this conversation, which was you were in not banking. Where were you?
In trading and
In trading,
yeah,
in finance,
exactly.
yeah. Tell us a bit about you as a person growing up, and then how you ended up here.
Sure. So I was born in Pakistan, in Karachi, right, as one of the biggest cities there. I stayed there for, until I went to college in Canada, and my family actually immigrated there in the mid 90s. Growing up in a developing market is interesting, and, I understand and appreciate it now as I look back, because I think growing up in a developing country teaches you a lot of things that perhaps being in a developed country does not. So one of the key, I think, skills that I have now is problem solving, right? And when you're in a developing market, I mean, everything is problem solving, and sometimes problem solving is a matter of survival. So, growing up in that environment, learning problem solving was absolutely crucial, right? It also teaches you a lot of resilience. But, again, as a typical South Asian family, to say that education was taken seriously in my household would be the understatement of the century, right?
Oh, really?
So it's if you say, hey, I did an exam and I got 5 A's and 3 B's, they'll be like, wow, that's just terrible. I mean, what happened to the other 3?
Oh my gosh.
So, it's taken some while and maybe a bit of therapy to find peace with the fact that, I was pushed, but I also see that is now, the drive and ambition I had was instilled by parents who wanted more and more. And, I was very fortunate that I grew up surrounded by amazing examples of self-made people. My family, immigrated from India during the partition. My father and his family, came to what would become Pakistan. My grandfather was actually an English professor in a local university. That's what he brought with him. He managed to put 2 of his, sons through law school for free because, that's where he was teaching.
Yeah.
My dad went on to become a very renowned lawyer in Pakistan. His siblings went on to do, great things and successes in their areas as well. I had an uncle, for example, my mother's brother, who moved to the US in the 70s, started a tech company, became the ultimate manifestation of the American dream, created this incredible tech company that he eventually exited. And I had the great privilege of seeing his journey to kind of,
So you had a lot of inspiration around you.
I had a lot of inspiration around me, and it's great. I'm very fortunate that I had to see that, because it makes you believe in what's possible, right? That you can actually come from, humble beginnings or any beginnings, and you can accomplish great things. To be able to see that in example after example was amazing. But, I think my family, when they moved to Canada, that was also a game changer, because for me, I look at myself as a product of East and West, right? So first thing I realized when I got to Canada, and this was an interesting observation, I felt my brain felt different. And I didn't quite get why that was. And a few months later, I realized that there are great, there are good things about being in a developing country, but there are challenges being in a developing country. I'd spend most of my childhood and my teens in a constant state of fight or flight because you don't know what's coming around the corner. And suddenly that stress was gone in Canada, and I ended up going to a great university, University of Western Ontario. I went to the top business school in Canada. It had a great impact on my development. But again, from an early days, something my parents instilled in me was to always be different. They were, even though they were in a place like Pakistan, which is puts a high value in conformity, they always did their own thing.
Wow.
They didn't care what anybody thought.
And look at you building alternative schools.
Absolutely. So and again, these are recent realizations, because I think you criticize your parents a lot when you're young, and then it's later you realize that even the tough things were, taught you something that made you the person that you are today. So I see, everything that they gave me. And, once I went to business school, again, everybody wanted to get a corporate job. I said, no, I want to go be an equity trader. And I went to New York to look for jobs. I used to go every couple of weekends. Of course, I had an uncle there with a nice house that I could crash in. I got a job as an equity trader, ended up at Goldman Sachs, which is, one of the ultimate firms on Wall Street. Perhaps didn't appreciate it as much as I do now, because even now, 25 years later, somebody looks at my resume and says, wow, you worked at Goldman Sachs? And I was like, okay, yeah, that was a while ago, but sure, yes, I did. And then I left Goldman to start my first business in New York. It was a healthcare outsourcing business. Didn't go well at all. I was 25 years old. I didn't know what I was doing. It was kind of a disastrous experience, right? So the business did not work. I went through a very difficult time coping with the aftermath of it. But again, now that I look back, if I didn't have that failure under my belt, I wouldn't be successful now, because sometimes you learn more from failure than you do from success. And I learned tremendously from that experience. It triggered a personal development journey that, made me start picking up books and reading about Bob Proctor and Tony Robbins, and eventually led me to you to really continue this development journey, which has been transformational in my life. And, as I said, I eventually found my way to Dubai, working for Booz & Company as a strategy consultant. And then as soon as I became a parent, as you've realized, my perspective shifted, and that's how Masterminds came about.
Well, I'm so glad that I asked you that question, because now I have a much deeper understanding as to why you are the way you are, the way you think, the way you have the goals that you have, why you have the goals that you have, and why you are so driven. Didn't realize you had so much inspiration around you growing up. Like I know you said already, but you were very, very fortunate.
I was. And I realize that now looking back. I definitely took it for granted, and maybe even criticized it when I was in it.
Never too late.
Yeah.
Never too late. So you have a premium level school in Dubai, or a premium school rather. And now you are building micro schools around the world. Tell us a bit more about that.
Sure. So, when I started off, the mission has always been that we're going to take this model of, evidence-based education that focuses on individualized learning to children all over the world. So when I started the first school, the early years school in Masterminds, I thought I'm going to go and I'm going to build all these big schools in Dubai all over the world. But I realized quickly that is very capital intensive. And it is very regulatory intensive. There are many regulatory hurdles to kind of do that. Now, I was trying to figure out what the right model is going to be. Now, once we had the curriculum and we knew that we could create exceptional intelligence, even giftedness in children, we knew that we had something that was $1 billion idea. It was really about finding the model that would work. And in business terms, investors call this product market fit, when it clicks and it starts to work. So when COVID hit, everybody thought, hey, everything is going to go online and nobody's ever going to leave the house again, for work or for school. And we pivoted because we needed to, and we created an online offering for our students because they were in lockdown and they were at home for 6 months. And then we launched the same online offering, which was really an online version of our earlier school. And while many people were struggling with online, since we were earlier specialists, our online school worked. And it worked incredibly well for about 6 to 8 months. And then people realized that they were kind of sick of online and they wanted their kids to kind of go back to school.
Yeah.
So I was then scratching my head in terms of, what is really the right model to deliver this exceptional curriculum? And then as I started attending events in California, in New York, I started to see this emergence of a microschool movement in the US. A microschool, as the name suggests, is just a small school, which has small numbers of
It sounds
students.
very technical, but it's just a small
It's a small school. I
Yeah.
mean, that's really what it is with small class sizes. And I realized that in reality, what we've been doing in Dubai is a micro school model. I mean, we teach kids in groups of 6 to 8. This is exactly what a micro school does.
Okay, so just to clarify, so a micro school would be classed as how many kids?
So a total
maximum?
It would definitely be less than 100 children, more likely to be between 50 to 70 children as a whole.
In the whole
In the
school?
whole class. Class size it would be on average 6 students. 5 to 6 students is what we would have per class, and that's what, that's the level that we would teach at.
Could 10 students be a micro school, a micro class?
It could be, right? But smaller is better, right?
Yeah.
And again, I think we find 6 to 8 is a good number because it is enough children for socialization, right? Because, sometimes people ask us the question, isn't it better to be in a big class for socialization? Well, no, because even in a class of 20, kids are not friends with 20 kids. They're close friends with 2, 3, 4,
You start
5.
having gangs and groups.
Absolutely.
And
so 6 is a gang, right? It's enough to be.
That's a good way to think about it.
And then we started this micro school in Dubai. Again, it was meant to be a pilot where we have something like 24 students. So it's a small pilot of 6 pods of 6 children each. And we essentially took the early years, extended it to elementary and middle school all the way up to year 8. And again, we started seeing that we could take these kids who are coming out of our early years school, or even not coming out of our early years school, but with that individualized approach to learning, again, create incredible outcomes. Next week, the 7 to 9-year-olds in our micro school in Dubai are going to be presenting what they've learned about Greek mythology and Roman
7
architecture.
and 8-year-olds.
And they pushed.
I could barely tie my own shoes.
They pushed us to do this presentation because they love the topic and they're so incredibly inspired.
What,
by
the
it.
kids pushed you?
The kids pushed us. We want to share this with our parents because they're loving this topic.
So there's a strong link between this kind of education and confidence as well.
Absolutely. Because again, they're in a class of 6. The learning is happening at their level. If anything needs to be adapted, it is adapted for every child. No teacher has an excuse to say, well, I can't teach this child because this child is difficult. No, sorry. The accountability belongs to the teacher. If a child is not learning, you need to figure out how you're going to adapt the learning to deliver to that child.
So it's not like the child has to fit into the box. It's the teacher has to fit around the child.
Absolutely. And that's why it works. So now that we know this model works, we're opening our first micro school in Palo Alto, California later this year. Why Palo Alto? Because we wanted to be in the hub of innovation in the Silicon Valley ecosystem to really be able to leverage that kind of innovation from there to grow it further. We're recruiting a team there. We found some incredible people who are bringing more innovation in STEM, in math, and science that's going to really enhance the offering further. At the same time, with all the development in tech, we're also building the Masterminds engagement monitoring and adaptive curriculum system.
Can you explain that?
So very simply, this is a system that in a micro school, in a classroom, is actually going to eventually be able to gauge whether a child is engaged with a particular piece of content and with a particular style of teaching. And at some point, we're going to get to that point in the next 12 to 18 months where the system will be able to adapt the curriculum in real time and tell the teacher you should shift your style or shift the content to actually do it a little bit differently this way to make sure that this child and this child are as engaged as the rest of the group.
That's extraordinary.
So it's about, today we're depending on teachers entirely, and teachers do an incredible job, but this is like a superpower to give to a teacher where AI, which can analyze millions of signs from where a child is looking to what their facial expression is, to even what their heartbeat or their heart rate is when they're excited about a particular piece of content, and to leverage that to really hyper individualize the teaching, the learning style, the curriculum to each child. So that's the model we're taking forward now. Tech-enabled micro schools that are going to, in my view, revolutionize education everywhere.
Super inspiring, Shamal. Thank you so much. How can people support you or get involved in your mission?
Well, I think, one important thing is, of course, to create awareness of an alternative mode of education.
There's a better way.
Absolutely. And when you do something innovative, and we face this with our earlier school as well, people look at you a bit suspiciously, right? Because it's so out of the ordinary. But now we've established a reputation and people see that what we do works. And we've done so many parent surveys all over the world. Parents everywhere are frustrated with the traditional system. They all want something better, and I think this is something that we're giving to them. So being aware that there is a better way to do it, where in a micro school model, we have the ideal mix of academic rigor, enrichment, and life skills. This is really the model going forward. So being aware of that, looking up where Masterminds micro schools are opening in the U.S., in California and around the U.S. and around the world. And also we're now out and we're actually raising investment funds to actually help us scale quickly. We're going ahead with our growth, but the investment funds will help us get there faster. We're doing this in two pillars. We're doing a crowdfunding campaign through WeFunder, which is going to launch in the next 2 weeks or so. And the idea behind that is that it's not really just about the investment, it's about building a movement. We want to give hundreds and thousands of people who believe in this mission to actually be able to contribute to it, to be able to invest in it, but to also be able to benefit from our growth and as our valuation as a company kind of grows. And then we're also directly speaking to accredited investors, institutions, high net worth investors who might be looking to make a larger investment in Masterminds, and we have a separate structure for that as well. But in the past, I've raised $12 million across all kinds of debt, equity, all kinds of rounds. We've tried different things. In the past, we've raised like one check from, let's say, $5-6 million from one institutional investor, which is fine. But for now, what the thing that I'm really looking for is to find investors who are aligned with our mission.
I love this.
Who really see what we're trying to do. And yes, there's no doubt that they will get the financial benefit of that, because the projections will show that they will get an incredible return on investment, and we're projecting at least 2x their investment in the next 5 years. But beyond that, they know that they are part of contributing to something that can really change the world, because education is fundamental. It's about getting kids ready for the disruption that's coming, for the innovation that's coming, to help them adapt, on a constant basis to the state of flux that the world is going to be in. So that's what I'm really looking for now, as compared to how we've done it before, to look for investors who can be smaller than they've been in the past, but as long as it's a movement that is really aligned with the mission, about what we're trying to create. Yes, we're going to have the business success and we will have the investor returns, but to realize that there is a big overarching mission behind this, which is, I think really important for everyone. It's important for the world.
I think that's why I got so emotional before, because what you're doing literally has, not saying that anyone else is not doing anything similar, but what you are doing literally has the potential to change the world by changing the future leaders of the world. And everything that definitely I will be getting involved, because everything that this stands for and everything that this represents is exactly what I want for my daughter and for any of my future children. For anyone that's thinking, oh, I can't get to a micro school, or I'm not in Dubai, but I'm so inspired and fascinated by, and maybe even encouraged to do something as a result of listening to this or watching this on YouTube, what can people do at home to start bringing out the genius in their own child if they are stuck in a traditional school?
Yeah. So, we have we have a website called mastermindsearlylearning.com. So it's, this is the website where we created the initial online school. There's actually a free parent masterclass on that website. So people can actually sign up for the free parent masterclass, and that actually addresses that point exactly, to say what parents can start actually doing at home to actually do things with their child, because there's a tremendous amount that you can start doing at home directly. And and I encourage everybody to take a look at that masterclass. I'm one of the speakers on that masterclass. We have somebody called Elisa Guerra, who's actually part of the UNESCO Commission on the Future of Education. She's published part of publishing a report on what the UN thinks that the future of education should look like. Really inspiring speaker as well. So it's a talk by both of us to kind of, it's practical strategies about what parents can start actually doing at home. So yeah, I do encourage everybody to take a look at that.
Well, there you go. There's a lot of ways that people can get started. Can you just say the link again?
It's mastermindsearlylearning.com.
And then your school in Dubai is masterminds.ae.
That's masterminds.ae. And then, the other website for the Dubai Micro School is mastermindsvip.com, because we feel that it's a VIP offering considered, but the VIP really entails to, that we're talking about the children, because, that's how we kind of think of them. And the mastermindsmicroschools.com, that is something US centric that will be up and running very, very soon.
Amazing. So inspiring once again. I know that one of the reasons why you're doing all of this is because you want to be the best role model to your kids that you can possibly be. And it's also why you've got so locked into personal development and working on yourself and being the best version of yourself outside of your business ventures. Why is it so important to you to be the best role model that you can be to your family and to your kids?
Well, I think, and that's something to realize as a parent, and sometimes it's a tough realization, right? Because you realize that your kids are observing your good habits and your bad habits, and
Everything.
everything. So, for me, I think I want to model the right behavior for them. I want to model the right values for them. I want to model success for them. I want to model fitness for them. And when you and I met each other a few months ago, it was like it was meant to be, because I was looking for something. I felt a bit stuck, right? I'd gone through a very difficult journey to get to this place, and I was a bit tired. I didn't know how to kind of take it to the next level. So, I knew I was looking for something. So when you came along as a performance coach, I was like, wow, this is exactly what I was looking for. And it's been an incredibly transformational 3 months, I would think. I mean, it's, from the simple stuff that, I've learned with you, whether it's the non-negotiables, that you do every morning to start your day off right, whether it's just going for a run. I mean, for me, the longest time running was drudgery. I was like, my God, I never wanted to do it. Even in the gym, I wanted to do strength training, never cardio. But
I
just
wish people could see the video of our run this morning,
they
how
sh-
it started and how it
Exactly. When I couldn't run 3 minutes at one go, when we started 3 months ago, and we did almost a
almost
5K
5K. Yeah.
in 30 minutes. I mean, it's already a major leap. And the fact is that I enjoy it. I crave going running, because as you've taught me that it's meditation in motion. And when I think about it that way, when I reframe it that way, it changes it completely. And now I'm taking my kids running with me as well. They're groaning and moaning at this point, but they'll get there.
They will get there.
And simple things, I mean, about understanding, the basic psychological needs that the framework we've talked about, and how that determines behavior, and, being grateful for the last 24 hours. It's really been incredible. And for me, I mean, in 3 months, I'm more energized, I'm more focused, I have greater clarity. It has practical implications for the next phase of my business journey, to have more energy for my family, for my kids. And yeah, I mean, just all around success in every area of my life. And that's why it's incredibly important.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Once again, I'm inspired by you. Just keep doing the good work that you're doing. And it's such a pleasure to be in your corner and to know you and to call you a friend now. If you could leave your kids one message, I know this sounds like a dark question, but I find it a very motivating question. And I remind myself of this often. If this was your last year to live, what message would you like to leave your kids?
Well, there are many ways to put it, but I'll actually put it based on the wristband you gave me this morning. Be extraordinary. You're meant to live an extraordinary life, and be extraordinary. And the book that I'm about to write, I mean, it's a book of lessons for my children, right? Because if I'm not around tomorrow, I want them to understand, I want them to see all these genius lessons, and I want them to live their life that way. And yeah, but I mean, if I had to sum it up, it's all about, be extraordinary, because, the potential is there. You just have to go and meet it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you
you.
coming onto the podcast. I cannot wait to share this. And quick note of, because I've forgotten twice in this episode to mention this. I did a post after my daughter was born, and I said, there's absolutely no way my daughter will go to a traditional school. They got the highest engagement of any of my posts in terms of likes, but the comments were generally all against that. Like you mentioned before, people think you're a bit crazy or something. So I think it's very courageous work that you're doing, but it's very impactful work. And no doubt that if you just keep doing the same thing and you keep growing and learning from everything that you're doing, you're going to leave a massive dent in the universe. So thank you for doing the work that you do. I see you, I salute you, I celebrate you.
Thank you so much. It was incredible being here and just sharing all these things.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.